This week, the County Board of Supervisors approved the budget for the next fiscal year. I want to talk about some interesting things about it and what I would do differently in that process of reviewing and approving the budget. So first of all, the budget hearings, which is where the Board of Supervisors gets to talk to county staff about the budget that they proposed, went about 11 hours this year compared to just 5 hours last year and historically roughly around 1 to 3 hours. Now, I think that this is probably a good thing. As long as, the conversation is respectful and collaborative, I think it's good that the board is scrutinizing the budget and, trying to figure out, is this the right decision for how we're spending $658 million? Now, here's the interesting thing then. After 11 hours of questioning, the board approved the budget as it was recommended. So they made no changes. Now, that might be the right course of action. But the interesting thing is it doesn't seem to fit with what the board majority has told us about how they think about government. They've told us and implied to us that the government needs to be smaller, it needs to be more limited, that it's spending and wasting too much money, that the county staff is too big and we need to outsource or contract with others rather than having so many staff on our payroll. And so let's look at a few of these numbers. First of all, the budget that was approved represents a 4.8% increase over last year's budget. So we increased the budget by almost 5%. Now again, that might be the right action. And maybe you're thinking, well, that might be for the election costs that we talked about. And maybe you agree that those costs should be there. Well, the election cost is only around $1.5 million. This increase is about $50 million. So that's only a small portion of it. Now you might also be thinking, well, maybe that's inflation. We've been seeing inflation nationwide. So what I did, and I thought the same thing, is looked at Butte County. So Butte County, where Chico is, has roughly the same number of people, same geography, and I looked at how did their budget change from last year to this year. 1.3% increase, compared to 4.8% increase in Shasta County. Now again, I'm not saying that increase is wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't fit with what we've been told by the board majority about how they think about this government and how they think about our spending. Let's look at another area, personnel, so number of staff, right? The staff projected and approved in this budget represents the biggest increase in 3 years. So again, that might be right, but we have to compare it to what this board majority has told us, and they've told us that there's too many staff, that we're spending too much money, we need to cut waste. And that doesn't appear to be happening because they approved the budget as is, they increased the budget 5%, and they increased the staff for the most in 3 years. So what would I do differently? Well, first of all, I don't know how you review a budget if you don't have goals that you're trying to hit. So how do you know if you're spending your money right if you don't know what you're trying to achieve with that money? And so I think the first thing we need to start with is actually having goals laid out of this is what we're trying to achieve as a county, and this is what we're trying to achieve at each department level. Now you might think, okay, maybe governments just don't do that. I mean, it makes sense, but maybe governments don't do that. Well, the City of Reading budget, if you look it up, and I'll put a link to this in my bio, if you look it up, you'll see that they have goals that are citywide and for each department across 5 different metrics like economic development. And so we need to start there. We need to know what are we trying to achieve, because only then can we figure out if we're spending the money correctly. The second thing I would do differently, again, I think spending 11 hours talking with the county staff and the directors is probably a good idea. I don't know if that's the exact amount, but you're not going to get into the level of detail and scrutiny to be able to figure out where the cuts could be, if we need cuts, in a single setting. I built budgets for organizations when I was working at a nonprofit that advised other nonprofits to the tune of tens of millions of dollars over 5 to 10 years. And there are tons of assumptions that go into it. And so what would I do differently? I would sit down with each of the directors in advance of the budget hearing and understand what are your goals and priorities for this next fiscal year, and how does your budget help you achieve that? And is there any room to shrink that budget? And so I would go into this meeting already with recommendations for how I would change the budget that I would then present to the other Board of Supervisors to see if they agree with that and approve that. So this is how I think we need to approach the budget differently. Is the budget wrong? Again, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to square with what we have heard from our current board majority.